Have you ever wondered how a website goes from being just a static, kind of boring page to a full-blown interactive application? You know, the kind of site that greets you by name, remembers what's in your shopping cart, or shows you content that it knows you'll like? Well, today, we are pulling back the curtain on the magic that makes all of that possible.
I mean, really think about it for a second. How does a site remember you're logged in, or show you a list of products based on what you looked at yesterday? It's not magic, not really. It's technology. And specifically, it's a super powerful duo that has been the backbone of the web for, gosh, decades now. So let's solve this mystery, shall we?
Okay, let's dive right in. The whole secret, the real engine behind all this, it doesn't happen on your computer. It happens on the server, this big, powerful computer that does all the heavy lifting before a web page even gets to your screen. And this is the world of server-side scripting. And that brings us to our first key player, PHP. Now, the name stands for Hypertext Preprocessor, but what you really need to know is that this language runs on the web server, not in your browser. Think of it like a chef in a restaurant kitchen. The server takes your order, your request. The PHP chef prepares the dish exactly how you want it, and only then is the final perfect plate, the finished HTML page, delivered to your table.
So how does this kitchen actually work? Well, it's a pretty simple four-step dance. First, you, the user, request a page that ends in .php. The server sees that extension and knows, aha, I've got work to do. It hands the file over to the PHP engine. Now, the engine is smart. It ignores all the plain HTML, but it finds and executes only the code that's inside those special PHP tags. And then, once it's done, it sends back a plain, simple HTML page. Your browser never even sees the secret PHP recipe.
So to build these kinds of dynamic sites, you need a workshop, right? A place with all your tools. And for a lot of developers, that's the WAMP stack. It's an all-in-one toolkit. You've got Windows for your operating system, Apache, that's the web server, the guy who's listening for all the requests, MySQL, which is your database. Think of it like a giant library for storing all your data. And of course, PHP, the scripting language that brings it all together.
All right, so we've got our workshop all set up. Now it's time to learn how to use the most important power tool in the box. Let's get into the nitty-gritty, the fundamentals of the PHP language itself.
You know, diving into PHP code actually feels pretty familiar if you've ever seen languages like C or JavaScript. You write your logic inside these special PHP tags. Variables are super easy to spot. They all start with a $sign. And think of the semicolon at the end of a line as just a period in a sentence. It tells PHP, okay, that command is done. But here's a really cool feature. PHP is smart enough to figure out if your variable is a number or text or something else. You don't have to declare it beforehand.
Now, here's a little detail that trips up a ton of beginners. The difference between double quotes and single quotes. The easiest way to remember it is this. Double quotes do work. They actively look for variables inside a string, and they swap in their values. Single quotes, on the other hand, they're kind of lazy. They treat everything literally, printing the variable's name, $sign and all.
And here's a perfect visual of that. See how the top example, the one with double quotes, correctly prints out the values? The sum is 30. But the bottom one, with single quotes, just prints the variable names literally. It's a tiny difference in punctuation, but it has a huge impact on what you see.
And one last quick tip on strings. If you want to join two pieces of text together, a process we call concatenation, PHP uses a dot, not a plus sign like you might be used to in JavaScript. That's a small but really common gotcha to remember. Okay, so far our script just runs straight from top to bottom. But now we get to the brains of the operation. Control structures are what let our code make decisions. They let it react differently in different situations, and they let us do repetitive tasks without having to write the same code over and over again.
So, the two main ways to make decisions are if-else and switch. An if-else statement is your go-to for simple binary choices. Is the user logged in? If yes, show the dashboard. If no, show the login page. A switch statement, though, is more like a receptionist routing calls. It looks at one variable and then chooses one path out of many possible options. It's just a much cleaner way to handle things than a huge, messy chain of if-else statements.
And what about repetition? Well, to avoid doing the same work over and over, we use loops. You can think of them as putting a set of instructions on autopilot. A while loop just keeps going as long as a certain condition is true. A for loop runs for a specific number of laps, and a for each loop is perfect for going through every single item on a list, one by one. Okay, so our script has a brain now. It can make decisions. But, you know, a brain without a memory isn't very useful. So, For our final act, we are going to connect PHP to its long-term memory, a MySQL database. And this is what truly unleashes its power.
MySQL is the database. It's where you store everything, all the user accounts, product lists, blog posts, you name it. And this isn't some lightweight tool. It's an industrial strength solution trusted by massive organizations like Yahoo and even NASA. So when PHP needs to remember something permanently, this is who it talks to.
So, how does that conversation actually happen? Well, PHP has two main translators it can use. There's the MySQLi API, that stands for MySQL Improved, and there's PDO, or PHP Data Objects. They both get the job done, but for this walkthrough, we're going to focus on the super common and widely used MySQLi functions. You know, interacting with a database almost always follows the same 5 steps. It's a fantastic pattern to just burn into your memory. First, you connect. Then, you create your command, your SQL query. Third, you execute that query. Fourth, you process and display the results. And finally, you disconnect. Connect, query, execute, display, disconnect. Simple as that. Now for the fun part. Let's see how all these pieces actually come together. We're going to walk through a simple little script that uses those 5 steps to pull a list of customers from a database and show it on a web page. And here's step 1, connection. We use this single function, mysqli connect, to basically dial up our database. We just have to give it the right address and the login credentials, and boom, it creates an open line for us to communicate. And if for some reason the connection fails, the script just safely stops right there. All right, next up are steps 2 and 3. First, we write our instructions. That's the SQL query, and we just store it in a simple text variable. In this case, we're asking for everything from the customer table. Then we use mysqli query to actually send that command down the connection we just opened. The database does its thing, runs the query, and sends the results right back to us. And now for step 4, displaying those results. This is where our loops come back into play. A while loop is absolutely perfect for this. The function mysqli_fetch_array grabs one row of customer data from the results. Our loop processes that row, maybe prints it out, and then it goes back to grab the next one and the next one until there are no rows left. And PHP gives you some really flexible ways to handle that data as it comes in. You can grab each piece of customer information, like their name or their user ID, and then just use standard HTML to display it in a table or a list or really any way you want. This is it. This is how a static page becomes a dynamic report. So there you have it. We started with a simple question and we ended with a complete solution. We've seen how PHP, the server-side brain, works hand-in-hand with MySQL, the long-term memory, to turn static pages into these rich, dynamic experiences. These are the fundamental building blocks of the interactive web. The only real question left is, what will you build with them?